Lord Sri Aurobindo. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, be sure that the Divine Mother will always be with you to carry you upon the path. Difficulties come and difficulties go, but she being with you, the victory is sure. With always our love and blessings, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo's Savitri, Book 6, The Book of Fate, Canto 1, The Word of Fate, page 421. To those who hearken to his celestial voice, the veil heaven's pity throws on future pain, the immortal's sanction seemed of endless joy. But Ashwapati answered to the seer. His listening mind had marked the dubious close, an ominous shadow felt behind the words. But calm like one who ever sits facing fate, here, mid the dangerous contours of earth's life, he answered covert thought with guarded speech. O deathless sage, who knowest all things here, if I could read by the ray of my own wish through the carved shield of symbol images which thou hast thrown before thy heavenly mind, I might see the steps of a young godlike life happily beginning luminous-eyed on earth. Between the unknowable and the unseen, born on the borders of two wonder worlds, it flames out symbols of the infinite and lives in a great light of inner suns. For it has read and broken the wizard seals. It has drunk of the immortal's wells of joy. It has looked across the jewel bars of heaven. It has entered the aspiring secrecy. It sees beyond terrestrial common things and communes with the powers that build the worlds, till through the shining gates and mystic streets of the city of lapis lazuli and pearl, proud deeds step forth, a rank and march of gods. Although in pauses of our human lives, earth keeps for man some short and perfect hours when the inconstant tread of time can seem the eternal moment which the deathless live, yet rare that touch upon the mortal's world, hardly a soul and body here are born, in the fierce, difficult moment of the stars, whose life can keep the paradisal note, its rhythm repeat the many-toned melody, tirelessly throbbing through the rapturous air, caught in the song that sways the Apsara's limbs, when she floats gleaming like a cloud of light, a wave of joy on heaven's moonstone floor.
सर्वदुष्ट भयंकरी सर्वदुख हरे देवी महामीरा नमोस्तुते सिद्धि बुद्धि प्रदे देवी भुक्ति मुक्ति प्रदायिनी मंत्र मूर्ते सदा देवी महावीरा नमोस्तुते आद्यन्तरहिते देवी आद्यशक्ते महेश्वरी योगदे योगसम्भुते महामीरा नमोस्तुते महामीरा नमोस्तुते
Words of our Divine Mother, taken from the collective works of our Divine Mother book 1950-1951, question and answers from the year 1950-1951, date 19th Feb 1951, taken from Mother's answering the question. This is page 132. In question and answers of 1929, 28th April, there's a quote that says, Yoga means union with the divine, and the union is effected through offering. It is founded on the offering of yourself to the divine. For this the child says, Sweet Mother, what is the difference between surrender and offering? For this our Divine Mother says, the two words are almost synonymous. I make the offering of myself and I surrender myself, but in the gesture of offering, there is something more active than in the gesture of surrender. Unfortunately, submission in French is not a true word. In English, we use surrender between the words surrender and offering. There is hardly any difference, but the French word submission gives the impression of something more passive. You accept while offering is giving, a voluntary giving. Sweet Mother, what is the exact meaning of the word consecration? For this, our Divine Mother says, consecration generally has a more mystical sense, but this is not absolute. A total consecration signifies a total giving of one's self. Hence, it is the equivalent of the word surrender, not of the word submission, which always gives the impression that one accepts passively. You feel a flame in the word consecration, a flame even greater than in the word offering. To consecrate oneself is to give oneself to an action. Hence, in the yogic sense, it is to give oneself to some divine work with the idea of accomplishing the divine work. Our Divine Mother says, when the resolution has been taken place and when you have decided that the whole of your life shall be given to the divine, you have still at every moment to remember it and carry it out in all the details of your existence. You must feel at every step that you belong to the divine. You must have the constant experience that in whatever you think or do, it is always the divine consciousness that is acting through you. You have no longer anything that you can call your own. You feel everything as coming from the divine, and you have to offer it back to its source. When one can realize that, then even the smallest thing to which you do not usually pay much attention or care ceases to be trivial and insignificant. It becomes full of meaning and it opens up a vast horizon beyond. These words were from the question and answers of 1929 on 28th April. For this, our Divine Mother gives a continuous explanation saying, because the least detail of life and action, every moment of thought, even of sensation, of feeling, which is normally of little importance, becomes different the moment you look at it, asking yourself, did I think this as an offering to the divine? Did I feel this as an offering to the divine? If you recall this every moment of your life, the attitude becomes quite different from what it was before. It becomes very wide. It is a chain of innumerable little things. Each has its own place, while formerly you used to let them go by without being aware of them. Our Divine Mother says that widens the field of consciousness. If you take half an hour of your life and think of it, putting to yourself this question, is it a consecration to the divine? You will see that the small things become a big thing, and you will have the impression that life becomes much richer and luminous. Question, sweet mother, identification is the goal of yoga. Can you say that surrender is the first step and offering the second? For this, our Divine Mother says no. Some begin with an offering and end with surrender. It depends upon the character of each one. You may perhaps begin by having a feeling of inferiority. You are a little crushed by the grandeur of the divine, and then you feel a little freer and give with joy what you are. This is not always so. Many begin by self giving. For them, the easiest moment is to give themselves. In the beginning, says our Divine Mother, the giving is a little indefinite. Then one has to make an effort at times to surrender in detail. You can give yourself with much enthusiasm, but when at every step you have to submit to the higher will, the thing becomes more difficult. Question, sweet mother, does not offering imply surrender? For this, our Divine Mother says, no, not at all. You can give the joy of giving without any idea of surrender. In a moment of enthusiasm, when you have glimpsed something infinitely higher than yourself, you can give yourself in an aeon. But when it is a question of living that very minute of surrendering oneself, every minute to the higher will, and when every minute requires this surrender, it is more difficult. But if by offering you mean the integral offering of all your moments, all your activities, that is equivalent to surrender, without implying it necessarily, but then it is no longer a moment made in enthusiasm. It is something which has to be realized in detail. One may say that any moment made in ardor and enthusiasm is relatively easy, that depends upon the intensity of the moment in you. But when it is a question of realizing one's aspiration, every minute of one's life and in all its details, the enthusiasm recedes a little and one feels the difficulty. Question, sweet mother, is there an experience which proves that one is living in the presence of the divine? For this, our Divine Mother says, once one begins to live in the presence of the divine, one does not question any longer. It carries its own certitude. One feels, one knows, and it becomes impossible to question. One lives in the presence of the divine, and it is for you an absolute fact. Till then, you ask because you do not have the experience, but once you have the experience, it is such an authority that it is indisputable. One who says, I think I live in the presence of the divine, but I'm not sure, has not had the true experience, for as soon as one has the inner shock of this experience, no more questioning is possible. It is like those who ask, what is the divine's will? As long as you have not glimpsed this will, you cannot know. You may have an idea of it through deduction, inference, etc., but once you have felt the precise contact with the divine's will, this too is not disputable any longer, And then our Divine Mother says, I add so that there may be no any misunderstanding. All experience has its worth only in the measure of the sincerity of the one who has it. Some are not sincere and fabricate wonderful experiences, and they imagine they have them. I put all that aside. It is not interesting, but for sincere people who have a sincere experience, once you have the experience of the divine presence, the whole world may tell you it is not true and you will not budge. Our Divine Mother says, if you are not sincere, you may have wonderful experiences, but These have no value either for you or for others. You should distrust your thought a good deal, for the mind is a wonderful constructor and it can give you wonderful experiences solely by its work of formation. But these experiences have no value. It is hence preferable not to know beforehand what is going to happen. For even with a great will to be sincere, the mind fabricates so much and so well that it can present to you a wonderful picture or even play for you a splendid comedy without your being aware of it by its sheer power of formation, and it is very difficult to find out. Hence, one essential condition for having the true experience, leave this machine in quietness. The less it moves, the better it is, and be aware of everything it imagines for you, says our Divine Mother. Question: Sweet Mother, are the soul and the psychic being one and the same thing? For this, our Divine Mother says that depends on the definition you give to the words. In most religions and perhaps in most philosophies also, it is the vital being which is called the soul. For it is said that the soul leaves the body, while it is the vital being which leaves the body. One speaks of saving the soul, wicked souls, redeeming the soul, but all that applies to the vital being. For the psychic being has no need to be saved. It does not share the faults of the external person. It is free from all reaction. 24th Feb 1951, our Divine Mother says, the other day I said that most of the time people do not have their psychic being within them. I would like to explain this in greater detail. You must remember that the inner beings are not in the third dimension. If you open up your body, you will find only the viscera of the body, which are in the third dimension. The inner beings are in another dimension, and when I say that some men do not have their psychic being within them, I do not mean that it is not at the center of their being, but that their outer consciousness is so small, so limited, so obscure, that it is not able to keep a contact not only conscious but intimate with a psychic being, which extends beyond it everywhere. So it is very much higher and deeper than the other outer consciousness, that there is no relation either of the quality or of the nature between them. Our Divine Mother says, religions say that you have a divine spark in you. It is well, they call it a spark, for it is so small indeed that it can be placed anywhere in the body without difficulty. But this does not mean that it is in the body. It is within the consciousness in another dimension. And there are beings who have a contact with it, others who haven't. Our Divine Mother says, but if you come to the divine presence in the atom, the image is easier to understand, for there you touch so infinitesimal a domain that you are on the borderline where you can no longer distinguish between 2, 3, 4, or 5 dimensions. If you study modern physics, you will understand what I mean. The moments constituting an atom are, in the matter of size, so imperceptible that they cannot be understood with our three-dimensional understanding, the more so as follows laws which elude completely this dimensional idea, this three-dimensional idea. So if you take refuge there, you may say that the divine sparks at the center of each atom, and you won't be far from the truth. But I'm not speaking of the divine spark, I'm speaking of the being, the psychic consciousness, which is another thing. The psychic being is an entity which has a form. It is organized around a central consciousness, and having a form, it has a dimension of another kind than the third dimension of the outer consciousness, says our Divine Mother. Prayers and Meditations, January 4th, 1914. The tide of materialistic thoughts is always on the watch, waiting for the least weakness, and if we relax but one moment from our vigilance, if we are even slightly negligent, it rushes in and invades us from all sides, submerging under its heavy flood, the result sometimes of numberless efforts. Then the being enters a sort of torpor. Its physical needs of food and sleep increase, its intelligence is clouded, its inner vision veiled, and in spite of the little interest it really finds in such superficial activities, they occupy it almost exclusively. This state is extremely painful and tiring, for nothing is more tiring than materialistic thoughts, and the mind, worn out, suffers like a caged bird which cannot spread its wings and yet longs to be able to soar freely. But perhaps this state has its own use, which I do not see. In any case, I do not struggle, and like a child in its mother's arms, like a fervent disciple at the feet of his master, I trust myself to thee and surrender to thy guidance, sure of thy victory.